The morning fog over Mayport, Florida, was thick and humid, rolling in from the Atlantic to wrap the naval station in a soft, gray stillness. It carried the heavy scent of salt and marine diesel. Lieutenant Jack Cal Callahan, 37, stood with his arms crossed, a lean, hard silhouette with a permanent sorrow in his eyes. He watched his partner work. Shadow. His 4-year-old German Shepherd was a study and discipline focus, his black and tan coat glistening in the damp air. They were on the training course, a simulated village market. And Shadow was running a bomb-sniffing drill. The dog moved with a fluid, intelligent grace, nose low, quartering the ground, ignoring the distractions of fake stalls and parked vehicles. Shadow was more than a dog. He was an extension of Cal, a 4-legged sensor package that had saved their team's lives more times than he could count. "Seek," Cal commanded, his voice a low, calm rumble. Shadow's ears twitched, and he angled toward a rusted-out pickup truck. He slowed, his tail rigid. He sniffed at a loose panel on the truck bed, then sat, clean and decisive, looking back at Cal. The signal. A trainer in a blast suit, observing from a safe distance, nodded and clicked his stopwatch. "Good find, Shadow." As the trainer approached to mark the device, another charge, part of a different drill across the field, detonated with a loud, sharp whump. It was a standard training sound, controlled and expected. But for Cal, it was a key turning a lock in his mind. The salt air vanished, replaced by the acrid, choking smell of gasoline and burning rubber. The cool Florida mist became the dry, searing heat of an afternoon in the Helmand province 2 years ago. He wasn't on a base. He was on Highway 4, watching the sun glint off the shattered windshield of a blue sedan. "Emily." He froze. The breath caught, trapped in his chest. The sounds of the bass faded, replaced by a high-pitched ringing and the memory of a laugh cut short. He was on patrol. She was on her way to the embassy clinic. He had told her it was safe. "Sir." Cal didn't hear the trainer. He was 2 years and 7,000 miles away. He felt a sudden, sharp pressure on his hand. A low, anxious whine. "Shadow." The dog had broken protocol, leaving his sit position. He was pushing his head hard into Cal's clenched fist, his intelligent brown eyes wide with concern, sensing the panic his handler was trying to hide. Shadow whined again, licking the back of Cal's hand. The rough, wet tongue was an anchor to the present. Cal blinked, the image of the blue sedan shattering like glass. He was back in the fog. His heart was hammering. He looked down at the dog. "I'm here, Shadow," Cal whispered, his voice hoarse. He stroked the dog's big head, his fingers trembling slightly. "I'm good. Good boy." The trainer tactfully looked away, pretending to check his notes. Everyone on the team knew about Lieutenant Callahan's ghost. An hour later, Cal was in the sterile cold of the Tactical Operations Center, a windowless room known as the Vault. The air hummed with servers and the smell of stale coffee. Commander Wallace, Cal's superior, stood at the head of the table. Wallace was a man in his 50s with a weathered face and eyes that missed nothing. He nodded as Cal entered. "Cal, take a seat." A young, nervous intelligence analyst, a petty officer with glasses, clicked a remote. A satellite image of a massive container ship, the Odyssey, appeared on the main screen. At 04:00 hours Zulu, the analyst began, "We picked up a distress call from this Panamanian-flagged vessel in the Arabian Sea." The signal was cut short. "We intercepted chatter shortly after from a terror cell claiming responsibility." Cal leaned forward, his focus absolute. The ghost was locked away. This was the mission. The analyst clicked again. A new face appeared. A young woman with intelligent eyes and brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wasn't smiling. She looked serious, competent. "The hijackers have one high-value hostage, Dr. Lena Petrova, 29. She's a lead epidemiologist for the CDC, returning from a WHO mission in Somalia when her transport was hit." Wallace cut in, his voice grave. "Dr. Petrova is not just CDC. She's the only daughter of General Morgan." The air in the room thickened. General Morgan, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a political powder keg. If the daughter of the nation's highest-ranking military officer was executed on a live feed, the entire region could destabilize. "What cell?" Cal asked, his voice flat. The analyst swallowed, clicking to the next slide. It was a grainy surveillance photo of a man in a dusty marketplace, his face half hidden by a scarf. "The primary suspect is a high-level operative known only by the codename Silas." The blood turned to ice in Cal's veins. The cheap ceramic coffee mug in his hand nearly cracked. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. But in his mind, he was no longer in the vault. He was back in Bagram in another briefing room 2 years ago, staring at that same code name, the name on the intelligence report after the bombing. The man they believed had planned the attack that killed Emily. The room was silent. Commander Wallace watched Cal's face. He saw the flicker, the shadow in his eyes deepening into something cold and hard. Wallace dismissed the analyst. "That'll be all, petty officer. Prep the full brief for the team." The young man nodded quickly and left, the heavy door thudding shut behind him. It was just Cal and Wallace. The commander walked around the table and stood in front of his best SEAL. "Jack." Wallace's voice was low, not unkind, but heavy as iron. "I know what that name means to you. I know who you're seeing right now." Cal remained perfectly still, his gaze locked on the grainy image of Silas. "This is a rescue, not revenge," Wallace said, his voice sharp, pulling Cal back. "You are the tip of the spear on this. You, your team, and Shadow. You go in, you secure the asset, and you get out. You are not hunting ghosts. You are bringing the general's daughter home." He leaned closer. "Understood?" Cal finally tore his eyes from the screen. He looked up at his commander. The shadow was still there, but the grief was gone, replaced by a cold, absolute focus. "Understood, sir." The C-130, a beast of steel, shuddered and roared as it fought the storm. Inside the red-lit cargo bay, Jack Callahan sat on a webbed bench seat, his eyes closed. The roar of the 4 turboprop engines vibrated through his bones, a familiar, violent lullaby. The air was thick with jet fuel and ozone. Rain hammered the fuselage like thrown gravel. This was a Category 3 hurricane, a churning mess of wind and water that made their insertion 10 times more dangerous and 10 times more likely to succeed. Across from him was the rest of the team. Bones McCoy, the team medic, was a 45-year-old with kind eyes and hands that had stitched more men together than a tailor. He was honing a medical instrument, his movements calm and economical. Next to him, Mitch Sparky Jensen, their EOD specialist, was running sensitive diagnostics on his kit for the 3rd time. Sparky was young, 28, and his focus was so intense it was almost a physical thing. Sam Reaper Davis, their sniper and second-in-command, was in his element. He was pale, quiet, and seemed to blend into the shadows of the bay. He was methodically waterproofing his rifle. And then there was Kevin FNG Bailey, no relation to the general. Bailey was the new guy, only 6 months with the team. He was pale, but not with focus. He was trying and failing to hide his nerves, his knuckles white as he gripped his harness. At Cal's feet, Shadow lay in a perfect sphinx pose, his body absorbing the turbulence without a flicker of distress. He was strapped into a specialized K9 jump harness attached directly to Cal. The dog's steady, rhythmic breathing was a counterpoint to the chaos of the engines. Cal reached down, his gloved hand resting on the dog's powerful shoulder. Shadow's warmth soaked through the glove. The dog didn't raise his head, but his tail thumped once against the metal floor. "I'm here." Cal's mind drifted unbidden to Silas. To Emily. He saw the grainy photo from the brief and his jaw tightened. Revenge. The word was like acid in his throat. Commander Wallace's warning echoed in his ears. "This is a rescue." He forced the image of Silas down, burying it. He looked at Bailey, then at Bones, then at Shadow. This was what mattered. The team, the mission. The loadmaster, a burly Air Force sergeant, held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. The team stood, hooking up their static lines. The massive ramp at the back of the C-130 began to whine, its hydraulics groaning as it lowered. A wall of torrential rain and screaming wind slammed into the cargo bay. The red interior lights were swallowed by a pitch-black abyss. This was a halo jump. High altitude, low opening. They would fall for thousands of feet into the heart of the storm. Go. One by one, they vanished. Reaper. Sparky. Bones. FNG hesitated for a split second, and Bones' hand on his back shoved him forward. Then Cal stepped into the void. Shadow was strapped tight to his chest. The fall was a violent sensory deprivation. There was no up or down, only the deafening roar of the wind and the stinging feel of cold rain hitting his exposed skin at over 100 miles per hour. He was falling blind. Shadow was a warm, solid weight on his chest, completely still, trusting him. Cal watched his altimeter, his hand on the ripcord. He let his mind go blank, becoming pure reflex. 10,000 feet. 5. He pulled. The canopy opened with a bone-jarring jolt, ripping him from the fall. Now he was hanging, oscillating wildly in the wind. Below him, nothing, only blackness. He could hear the ocean now, a deep, angry roar that swallowed even the wind. He braced for impact. They hit the water hard. It felt like hitting concrete. The cold shock of the Arabian Sea stole his breath. He cut away his harness, surfacing into a world of liquid mountains. Huge swells, 30 feet at least, crested with white foam. He found his emergency strobe, flicked it on. A tiny pinprick of flashing light. One by one, 4 other lights appeared in the churning dark. Zodiac now. Cal yelled over the storm. They worked fast, inflating the black rubber Zodiac raft. Getting into it was a fight. A wave crashed over them, swamping the raft, nearly sinking it. FNG, bail. Cal ordered. Bailey, shivering with cold, began bailing. Bones and Reaper paddled hard, fighting the sea. Cal and Sparky hauled Shadow over the side. The dog was nearly 90 pounds of dead weight. They collapsed into the raft, gasping. Engine. Cal commanded. Sparky pulled the starter cord on the small, muffled outboard motor. It sputtered, then caught, and they began to move. A tiny black speck in a universe of gray and black water. A flash of lightning ripped across the sky, and they saw it. The Odyssey. It was a fortress. A mountain of rust-red steel rising from the sea. Lights blazed on its decks. It looked impossibly tall. He's not trying to hide, Reaper observed, his voice flat. He doesn't have to, Cal said. In this storm, no one could approach by helicopter, and no one would be stupid enough to try by sea. Except them. They motored into the ship's shadow, the sound of their tiny engine lost in the crashing waves. Cal studied the hull, looking for the insertion point they'd memorized from the blueprints. There. A maintenance ladder running 40 feet up the hull to a lower deck. Reaper fired a grappling hook with a soft thump. It caught. He pulled, testing it. Solid. Bones, FNG, Sparky, go. One by one, they scaled the ladder, disappearing over the rail. Your turn, buddy. Cal clipped the dog into a specialized hoist harness. He attached the line to Shadow, then to his own climbing rig. He started up hand over hand, his boots finding purchase on the slick metal rungs. Shadow dangled below him, a silent passenger. The dog's complete, silent trust was unnerving. He didn't kick. He didn't whine. He just hung there. A 90-pound weight, his life entirely in Cal's hands. Cal's shoulders burned. The hull was slick with rain and algae. He climbed, focusing on one rung at a time, pulling the weight of himself and his dog. He reached the top, rolling over the rail onto the soaking wet deck. He unclipped Shadow, who landed silently. The dog immediately shook, sending out a violent spray of water. The deck was empty, slick with rain. The storm was their cover. Cal looked at his team, all 5 men, plus Shadow, soaked, cold, but alive and undetected. He put 2 fingers to his throat mic. Alpha team is on deck. We are moving. He gave a small, silent hand signal to Shadow. Seek. The dog put his nose to the wind and led them into the shadows of the steel labyrinth. The interior of the Odyssey was a steel maze, painted a dull, flaking gray that seemed to absorb the weak light from the emergency fixtures. The air was cold and heavy with the smells of rust and damp, a metallic taste that coated the back of the throat. The storm outside was a distant, angry rumble, a constant vibration felt through the soles of their boots. They moved in a single file stack, a 6-man, 1-dog Shadow, their movements economical and silent. Cal was at the point, just behind Shadow. The dog moved with an eerie grace, the pads of his feet making no sound on the metal deck of the passageway. Shadow was their true point man. His head moved in short, smooth arcs, tasting the recycled air for human scent, his ears swiveling to catch sounds Cal's muffled hearing couldn't. He was their hunter, their sentinel, and their guardian. They were 3 decks down, following the schematic on Cal's helmet display, heading for the ship's infirmary. Intel suggested it was the most logical place to hold a non-combatant hostage. They turned down a long, narrow corridor, this one darker than the last. Shadow stopped dead. He didn't tense. He didn't bristle. He just froze. Cal froze with him, his hand coming up instantly in a fist. The entire team halted behind him as one. Then came the signal. It wasn't a growl, not one a human could hear. It was a subsonic vibration, a low-frequency rumble in the dog's chest that Cal felt through the deck and the tension in the leash. Threat close. Cal held his position. He unclipped his fiber-optic camera, a snake-like scope, from his vest. He carefully slid it around the bulkhead, inching it forward. The low light display on his wrist lit up, showing 2 men. They weren't sailors. They were armed with AK variants, standing in a small alcove next to a junction box, smoking. They looked bored, careless. Cal pulled the scope back. He looked at Reaper, his second in command, and then at FNG, the new guy. He tapped them both. He pointed around the corner, held up 2 fingers, then made a silent throat-cutting motion. Silent takedowns. Reaper, his face a pale, emotionless mask, nodded once. FNG, who was breathing just a little too fast, gave a sharp, jerky nod. Reaper went first, a shadow detaching from the darkness. FNG followed a half-second behind, his movements fast, but a little stiff. Before the first guard even registered the movement, Reaper's gloved hand was over his mouth, his blade sliding in clean. The second guard turned, his cigarette falling, his eyes going wide. FNG was on him. There was a brief, desperate, soundless struggle, a choked gasp, and then silence. FNG stepped back, his chest heaving. He'd done his job perfectly. Reaper simply wiped his blade on the guard's tunic and signaled, "Clear." Cal watched FNG for a moment. The kid was fast, but he was rattled. Cal filed it away. No time. He gave Shadow the forward signal, stepping past the alcove without a second glance. They continued for another 50 yards. The corridor ended at a door with a small, faded red cross and the words infirmary. Again, Shadow stopped, but this time the signal was completely different. He didn't rumble. He lowered his head, his nose an inch from the gap under the door. He sniffed once, twice, then backed away, the hackles on his neck slightly raised. He looked at Cal, a clear, intelligent signal of danger. This wasn't a human signal. This was an explosive signal. "Sparky," Cal whispered into his mic. Mitch Sparky Jensen, their EOD expert, crept forward. He lay flat on his stomach, his face level with the deck, a picture of absolute calm. He produced a small, specialized kit, sliding a paper-thin sensor under the door. He studied the readouts on his wrist-mounted display, his brow furrowed. "Boss," Sparky breathed, his voice tense. "We've got a tripwire, but it's not just a wire. It's tied to a magnetic switch on the doorframe. It's thin, real thin, not military grade. This is custom." "Lethal?" Cal asked. "No," Sparky whispered back. And that was almost worse. "It's not designed to kill us. It's an alarm, a silent one. It's wired right into the ship's main electronics. If we breach this door, Silas will know we're here and exactly where we are." This changed everything. Silas wasn't just a thug. He was smart. He was hunting them. "Working," Sparky said. He worked for a long, painful minute, his fingers moving with a surgeon's delicacy. "I'm bypassing the loop. Now." "Okay, we're clear." Cal gave Shadow's shoulder a single pat, a silent, "Thank you." The dog had just saved the entire mission from being compromised. Reaper pushed the door open to a scene of chaos. The infirmary was a wreck. Medical cabinets were open, their contents spilled on the floor. Gauze, empty bottles, and patient files were scattered about. It was a deliberate, targeted search. The smell hit Cal first. Antiseptic and sterile, sharp and clean, even under the rust. It reminded him of the clinic Emily had volunteered at, a sharp, unexpected pang of memory. He pushed it down. "Focus." "Clear," Reaper called from the small adjoining office. Bones McCoy, their medic, moved through the room, his experienced eyes scanning the supplies. He wasn't kidding around. This room was prepped for something. A lot of emergency supplies are gone. Then he stopped. "Wait a minute." Bones knelt by a small stainless steel trash can. He reached a gloved hand in and pulled out a used syringe and a small glass vial. This was used recently. A powerful sedative, diazepam, high dosage. Cal looked at the ransacked room, the sophisticated tripwire alarm, the single discarded syringe. It was all theater. Silas knew they had the ship's blueprints. He knew they'd checked the infirmary first. He had set a trap, not to kill them, but to alert him. He had ransacked the room and left the syringe as a giant piece of bait. He was playing with them. He was telling them, "I have her. She's sedated. You're too late." "Where is she?" FNG asked, looking around the empty, confused room. Cal didn't answer. He was thinking. Silas was arrogant. He wouldn't be hiding in the engine room. He wouldn't be in the cargo hold. He'd be at the center of his new kingdom. And he'd keep his prize, General Morgan's daughter, where he could see her, and where everyone could see her. "He's not hiding her," Cal said, his voice cold steel. He turned to the team, his eyes like ice. "He's using her as a shield. He's on the bridge. The route to the bridge was up the ship's narrow central stairwell. The metal steps echoed softly no matter how carefully they moved. The constant, deep groaning of the ship fighting the storm was their only cover. It was too quiet. No patrols, no sentries. This whole section of the ship felt abandoned. "Wrong," Reaper whispered, his voice barely audible over the comms. "This feels all wrong." "He wants us here," Cal whispered back. He could feel the trap closing, his hand resting lightly on Shadow's harness. The dog was alert, his nose high, but he wasn't signaling any immediate threat. He was just tense, mirroring the team. FNG, the new guy, was moving well, his earlier anxiety now replaced by a sharp, adrenaline-fueled focus. He held his rifle at a ready position, his eyes scanning every shadow. He was learning. They reached the top landing. A single, heavy steel door marked bridge. It was closed. Unlike the infirmary, there were no obvious signs of tampering. Cal held up a fist. The team stacked up behind him. He looked to Sparky, their EOD expert. Sparky crept forward, running a thin electronic sniffer around the doorframe. He shook his head. "It's clean, boss. No magnetic switches, no pressure plates. It's just a door." That was worse. That meant the trap wasn't on the door. It was behind it. Cal unclipped his fiber optic camera. He knelt, his movements precise, feeding the thin black cable under the heavy door. Shadow sat at his feet, his body a solid block of muscle, ears forward, listening. The image flickered to life on Cal's wrist-mounted display. The bridge was dark, lit only by the green and red glow of the ship's navigation consoles. The storm-driven rain lashed against the wide forward windows. For a second, Cal saw nothing. Then the camera panned right, and his blood went cold. She was there. Dr. Lena Petrova. She was just like the Intel photo, smart, competent, and now utterly trapped. She was strapped tightly into the heavy leather captain's chair, her hands bound to the armrests, her head braced. But she wasn't unconscious. Her eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead into the darkness of her own ship. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. Her face was pale, set in a look of intense, angry focus. She was a doctor. She knew her body, and she was fighting. Strapped to her chest over her thin jacket was the device. It wasn't a simple pipe bomb. It was a vest, an intricate web of black wires, silver detonators, and 3 blocks of pale, plastic-wrapped C4. At its center, a digital display glowed a malevolent red. It read 94 BPM. As he watched, it ticked up to 95, then back to 94. She was actively trying to control her breathing. "Sparky, look at this," Cal breathed, feeding the signal to Sparky's display. "Oh no," Sparky whispered, his technical calm evaporating. That's a cardiac trigger." A sharp crackle from a speaker in the ceiling made them all jump. "Welcome, Jack." The voice was smooth, unaccented. It was cold, confident, and almost intimate. It was Silas. He wasn't in the room. He was everywhere. "I'm so glad you could make it," the voice continued, laced with a terrible, patient amusement. "Does this feel familiar? Another woman you swore to protect? Another bomb? I do believe I'm seeing a pattern in your life." Cal felt the blood drain from his face. The casual mention of Emily was a physical blow. He felt Shadow press his body against his leg, a silent, grounding weight. He felt it. Cal forced his breathing to remain even. He would not give this monster the satisfaction. "She's a doctor, you know," Silas mused as if discussing the weather. "She understands the trap perfectly, which makes it all the more exquisite. The device on her chest, as your expert has no doubt realized, is wired to her heart. It's a simple binary trigger. If her heart rate goes above 120 beats per minute, you know, that rush of panic and hope one feels at being rescued, she explodes." The voice paused. "And just to be sure, if it drops below 60, if she faints from exhaustion, or if you somehow manage to sedate her, she also explodes. She's in a perfect, painful equilibrium, Jack. She lives only so long as she can maintain a precise, terrible calm." The team was frozen. They stared at the closed steel door, now a tomb wall. The speaker crackled again, Silas's voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The general wanted a demonstration of my capabilities. He's going to get one. And you get to be the trigger. Go ahead, Jack. Breach the door. Be the hero. Your very presence, the sight of your face, will be her execution." The speaker clicked off. Silence. The only sound was the groaning of the ship and the muffled, rhythmic pounding of rain on the windows inside the bridge. Cal stared at the display on his wrist. The number was ticking. 98 BPM. His voice alone had made it rise. "Boss," FNG whispered, his voice cracking. "What do we do? We can't. We can't go in." Cal didn't answer. He watched the feed. He saw Lena close her eyes, her chest rising and falling in one long, controlled breath. The number dropped. 97. 96. She was fighting. He was trapped. He couldn't breach. He couldn't talk to her. He couldn't even let her know he was there. Silas had turned hope itself into a weapon. Cal pulled the scope back. He looked at Sparky. He looked at Bones. This wasn't a tactical problem anymore. It was a medical and engineering problem. "Sparky." Cal whispered, his voice raspy. "Talk to me. Tell me how we beat this." "Talk to me, Sparky," Cal repeated, his voice a rasp. The team was stacked outside the bridge door, the air thick with tension. "Boss, it's a nightmare," Sparky whispered back, his eyes glued to the schematic he was already sketching on his wrist display. "The trigger's binary, over 120, under 60. But it's also dependent on a capacitor. I can't just cut the blue wire. It's a sequence. I need at least 30 seconds on the device itself, and that's if I'm lucky. I have to put my hands on it. And if she sees us," Bones McCoy added, his voice grim, "her adrenaline will spike. We open that door, she panics, and we lose her. He's weaponized her own biology against her." Cal stared at the steel door. Silas was waiting for him to hesitate. He was waiting for him to freeze like he froze when Emily's car burned. "No, he wants us to wait," Cal said, his voice hard. "He wants us to think. We don't. We act." He looked at the team. "We go in fast and loud. Reaper, FNG, you have security. Expect a welcoming party." Silas didn't set this table without inviting guards. He turned to his medic. "Bones, you have the doctor. Be ready. If she passes out, you have seconds to get her heart rate up before it hits 60. He looked at Sparky. "You have the bomb. Nothing else matters." "What about you, boss?" Reaper asked. "I have the girl." Cal gave a silent hand signal to Shadow. "Watch our 6. The dog planted himself like a dark statue facing the stairwell they'd just climbed. "Listening." "Breach," Cal ordered. Reaper placed a small, rectangular-shaped charge on the lock mechanism. He tapped it. "Fire in the hole." The charge detonated with a high-velocity crack. The door blew inward, slamming against the bulkhead. Cal was the first one through. Shadow was at his heels. The bridge was chaos. Alarms blared, a piercing shriek. Lena Petrova, strapped to the chair, whipped her head toward the door, her body jerking in shock, and the bomb responded. The red numbers on her chest leapt. 98. 105. 112. 118. A high-pitched, frantic beeping joined the alarms. "Boss, she's spiking." Sparky yelled, his EOD kit already in his hands. "I can't touch it. It's on the edge. She's got to bring it down now." As if summoned by the noise, gunfire erupted. From the two narrow corridors leading to the port and starboard wings of the bridge, Silas's fighters, masked men in black tunics, opened up. Bullets sparked off the consoles, shattering screens. "Contact left. Contact right." Reaper yelled. He and FNG took cover behind a bank of servers, their rifles answering in short, controlled bursts. The air filled with the deafening roar of combat. "Sparky. Get to work." Bones yelled, drawing his sidearm and providing cover for the EOD tech. Reaper, FNG, suppress them. Shadow exploded into action. Two more fighters tried to rush from the stairwell. The dog met them with a snarling lunge, a 90-pound blur of fury that drove them back, buying the team precious seconds. But the beeping on Lena's chest was now a constant, piercing shriek. The display flickered 119, 120, 119. It was hovering on the brink. Sparky was frozen. "Boss, she's hyperventilating. I can't disarm it." Cal saw it all, the firefight, Sparky's desperate face, and Lena. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, locked on the masked men firing at them. She was sobbing, short, sharp gasps that were pushing her heart rate over the edge. He made a choice. He slung his rifle across his back. "Boss, what are you doing?" FNG yelled. Cal ignored him. He stepped out from cover into the middle of the room. A round zipped past his head, so close he felt the air move. He didn't flinch. He ripped off his helmet, tossing it aside. The roar of the battle, the alarms, and the bomb's shriek washed over him. He dropped to one knee in front of the chair, putting himself between her and the firefight. "Lena," he commanded. She started, her terrified eyes shifting to him. The display hit 120. The bomb screamed. "Lena, look at me." His voice wasn't a yell. It was a deep, powerful command that cut through every other sound. "Just me. Nothing else exists. You are a doctor, you know how to control your body." She was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. I can't." "Yes, you can." He stared into her eyes, forcing her to look at him. "Don't look at Sparky. Don't listen to the gunfire. Look at me. Look at me." Her eyes, wide and swimming in terror, locked on his. "Breathe with me," he said. He took a huge, deliberate breath. In for 4. Hold. For 4. Out. For 4. Now. Do it with me. Now. He breathed. She tried, but it was a ragged, broken gasp. The display held at 119. Again, his voice was relentless. In. 2. 3. 4. Hold. 2. 3. 4. Out. 2. 3. 4. She did it. Her chest shuddered, but she did it. The red number flickered. 115. "Good," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Again with me. In. Hold. Out." The frantic shriek slowed to distinct beeps. "Again, Lena, stay with me." 92. Sparky, who had been waiting like a compressed spring, moved in. "Okay. I'm on it." He knelt beside Cal, his hands a blur on the device, clipping sensors, probing wires. The firefight raged around their small island of calm. Reaper and FNG were moving, pushing the attackers back. Cal never took his eyes off Lena. He kept breathing with her, a slow nod of his head. In. Hold. Out. "You're doing it, Lena. You're doing it." Last wire. Gray capacitor, Sparky muttered to himself. "Got it." He raised his wire cutters. 3, 2, 1. Snip. The red light died. The beeping stopped. "Clear." Sparky yelled, falling back in relief. "It's clear." The instant the word was out, Cal drew his combat knife from his vest and in one fluid motion, sliced through the thick plastic zip ties binding Lena's wrists and ankles. The snip of the cutters was followed by a silence so profound it was almost as loud as the battle had been. The alarms were off. The gunfire had stopped. "Port side is clear," Reaper yelled from the corridor. "Starboard clear," FNG added, his voice an octave higher than usual. "They're falling back." On the bridge, the only sounds were the howl of the storm outside, and the gasping, shuddering sobs of Lena Petrova. The moment the threat was gone, the adrenaline that had held her heart rate steady vanished. She slumped in the chair, her body limp, held up only by the straps Cal had just cut. "Bones, check her," Cal ordered, putting his helmet back on. He took Lena's arm. "Dr. Petrova. Lena, can you walk?" She looked up at him, her eyes unfocused and pupils dilated. She was in deep shock. I don't." "We're moving now." Cal didn't have time for gentle. He pulled her to her feet. Her legs buckled instantly. With a muttered curse, he threw her arm over his shoulder, taking her full weight. "Bones, you get her other side. FNG, Sparky, Reaper, on me. Shadow, Seek." The dog, who had been guarding the stairwell, immediately moved to the point position, his nose already working, clearing the path ahead as they left the bridge. They moved fast. Cal was half dragging, half carrying Lena, who was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. "Adrenaline crash," Bones said professionally from her other side, also supporting her. She held it together for the bomb. Her body's paying the price. They moved through the dark corridors, a fast, tight knot of operators. Shadow led the way, a silent shadow, his ears swiveling. He was taking them to the nearest extraction point, the aft helipad. They burst through a heavy steel door, out of the dark, cramped interior of the ship into the full fury of the storm. The wind hit them like a physical blow, a wall of air and stinging rain. The deck was a chaos of crashing waves and screaming wind. "Helipad, 50 meters." Cal yelled over the roar. Shadow was 10 feet ahead, head low, scouting the path across the open, rain-swept deck. They were exposed. "Almost there, Lena. Just keep moving," Cal urged. And then he saw him. On a catwalk above, a metal walkway overlooking the deck, A single figure stood motionless. He was dressed in black, a long-barreled sniper rifle resting easily in his hands. It was Silas. He had been waiting for them. Silas! Cal yelled, shoving Lena toward Bones. Cover! Get her to cover! The team scrambled, but it was too late. Silas raised the rifle. He wasn't aiming for Cal. He was aiming for Lena. Cal didn't think. He lunged, pushing Lena and Bones with all his strength. Down! Get down! They tumbled behind a stack of cargo containers. The shot cracked. A sharp report nearly lost in the storm went wide. From behind the container, Cal raised his head. Silas was still there, unmoving. He lowered his rifle slightly and then, across the rain-swept distance, Cal saw him smile. Silas calmly, deliberately shifted his aim away from the container, away from Lena. He centered his scope squarely on Cal's chest. It was an execution. Cal froze, his eyes locked with the man who had haunted his dreams. Crack! The shot rang out, but Cal felt nothing. Instead, he heard a sound that broke his heart. A high-pitched, agonized yelp. Shadow, scouting ahead, had seen the shift in aim. He had seen the threat to his handler. In the instant between Silas's smile and the muzzle flash, the dog had turned and launched himself. He covered the 10 feet, leaping into the air, shielding Cal's body with his own. The sniper round meant for Cal's heart slammed into Shadow's shoulder. The dog was thrown sideways, his body hitting the wet deck with a sickening thud. He yelped again, a sound of pure agony, and tried to get up, but his front leg buckled. He collapsed, his blood hot and bright red, immediately diluted by the cold rain. Time stopped. Shadow, Cal whispered. The world dissolved. He wasn't on a ship. He was on a road in Helmond. The air smelled like gasoline. The body on the ground wasn't his dog. It was Emily bleeding out, dying while he stood and watched. No, Cal breathed. No, not again. Not again. He stumbled forward, his rifle forgotten. He was shutting down, his mind collapsing under the weight of his failure. He was frozen, useless, a ghost watching his world die all over again. Jack! A voice, sharp and clear, cut through the fog. Lena! She wasn't shivering anymore. The woman who had been a trembling, shocked victim seconds before was gone. Her eyes were no longer terrified. They were blazing with a fierce, analytical light. The doctor was in. She scrambled on her hands and knees, ignoring Bones's cry for her to stay put, and slid through the rain to Shadow's side. Jack! She yelled again, her voice a command. She ripped the sleeve from her jacket, her hands already probing the bloody fur. It's an arterial bleed. It's pumping. I need pressure now. She looked right at him, her face a mask of furious focus. Lieutenant, get over here. Help me. Press here. Her command, sharp and professional, was the shock he needed. It wasn't a plea. It was an order. It bypassed the grief and hit the soldier. The memory of Emily dissolved, replaced by the immediate, urgent reality. Shadow was bleeding to death. Lena was kneeling in the open. Cal moved. Jack, pressure now. Lena's command sliced through the fog in his mind. The ghost of Emily vanished, replaced by the fierce, rain-soaked face of the doctor and the immediate reality of his partner bleeding out on the deck. Cal slammed his hand down on the pressure point Lena had indicated, his training taking over where his broken mind had failed. Shadow let out a pained whimper. Bones! Cal roared, his voice pure command now. Bones McCoy, their medic, was already there, sliding on his knees across the wet steel, his aid bag flying open. I got him, boss. I got him. It's a through and through on the shoulder. He got lucky. He's bleeding out, Bones, Lena said, her voice fast and professional. Her shock was completely gone, replaced by a cold medical focus. It nicked the subclavian artery. She's right, Bones confirmed, already working to pack the wound. I can slow it, but I need to get him on the bird now. Reaper, Cal yelled into his comms, his eyes scanning the catwalk above. Silas was gone. Status? No contact, boss, Reaper's voice crackled back. He's pulled back. He's inside. This was the moment of decision. The extraction chopper was inbound, but Silas was still loose. Cal looked at Bones, his hands covered in Shadow's blood. He looked at Lena, who was helping Bones pack the wound, her small hands working deftly alongside the seasoned medics. Bones, get him and Dr. Petrova to the helipad now, Cal ordered. He looked at the rest of his team. Reaper, FNG, Sparky, you are their escort. Your only priority is getting them and Shadow on that helicopter. Clear? Clear, boss, Reaper confirmed. Boss, what about you? FNG asked, his eyes wide. Cal stood, his gaze fixed on the dark doorway Silas had vanished into. The ghost was loose, and he was done running. He chambered a fresh round. I'm not letting him leave this ship. He didn't wait for a reply. He turned his back on the rescue, on his team, on his dog, and sprinted back into the dark labyrinth. He wasn't a rescuer anymore. He was a hunter. He moved through the passageways, his senses on fire. The ship was a groaning, twisting beast. He descended deck by deck, following the distant, rhythmic thrum that was the Odyssey's heart. He was moving toward the loudest sound, the one place he knew Silas would make his stand. The engine room. Cal kicked open the final watertight door. The sound hit him like a physical blow, a deafening, overwhelming roar of machinery. The engine room was a massive, two-story cavern of heat, steam, and pounding pistons. The air was thick with diesel and hot oil. And there, standing on a central catwalk, as if he were waiting for him, was Silas. He was in a simple black vest, his face uncovered now. He was younger than Cal had imagined, his eyes dark and intelligent, and he was smiling. He wasn't holding a rifle. He was holding a small, simple device in his left hand, his thumb resting on the button, a dead man's switch. Silas saw Cal and his smile widened. He had to yell to be heard over the engines. You came. I knew you would. You just can't help yourself, can you, Jack? Cal raised his rifle, the red dot settling on Silas's chest. Ah, Silas warned, waggling the switch. These charges are wired to the main hull. Kill me, and my hand relaxes. We all go to the bottom. A fitting end. Cal held his ground, his jaw set. You failed, Silas yelled, his voice full of sadistic glee. You came all this way. You faced the storm. You solved my little puzzle on the bridge, but you still failed. You failed to save Emily, and now you've lost your dog. That was it. The final, cruel truth. The ghost of Emily rose up, screaming in his ear. Kill him. Avenge me. Pull the trigger. His finger tightened. He saw the red sedan. He saw the flames. But then another image pushed it aside. It was Lena. Her face pale and fierce in the rain, her small hands, a scientist's hands, covered in Shadow's blood. She wasn't demanding vengeance. She was fighting for a life. She was yelling at him, help me. Silas was wrong. The ghost was a liar. He wasn't fighting for revenge. He was fighting out of gratitude. He was fighting for the woman who had saved him from himself. He was fighting so that Shadow's sacrifice and Lena's courage would mean something. His breathing slowed. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, pure clarity. He lowered his rifle an inch. Silas saw the hesitation and mistook it for weakness. He laughed, a sound torn apart by the engines. That's it, Jack. Hesitate. Be the failure you've always. Cal moved. He didn't fire. He dropped his rifle, letting it hang on its sling, and launched himself forward. He covered the 20 feet of catwalk in 3 long, silent strides. Silas's eyes widened. He tried to raise his hand to release the switch, but he was too slow. Cal slammed into him. This wasn't a brawl. It was a clinical, brutal application of CQC. He didn't hit Silas in the face. He didn't go for the kill. He went for the hand. He seized Silas's left wrist, twisting it in a sharp, rising lock. Silas screamed as the bones in his forearm snapped with a sickening, wet crack. His fingers spasmed open. The dead man's switch flew free. Cal, his other hand already moving, snatched it out of the air. He spun, slamming Silas against the hot steel railing, his forearm crushing the man's throat. Silas gagged, his eyes wide with shock and pain, his broken arm dangling uselessly. Cal looked at the switch in his hand. He flipped the safety cover, disabling it. He tossed it aside. He pulled a pair of zip cuffs from his vest, wrenched Silas's good arm behind his back, and cuffed him to the railing. Silas was gasping, sobbing, broken. Cal leaned in close, his face inches from the terrorists. His voice was a low growl, almost lost in the engine roar, but Silas heard every word. It's over. Cal left Silas cuffed to the railing, the terrorists' gasping curses swallowed by the roar of the engine room. He began the long climb back through the dark, groaning guts of the ship. He moved with a new purpose, no longer a hunter. The ghost was gone. He was just a soldier. His partner was down, and he had to get his team home. When he emerged back on the aft deck, the scene was one of controlled, violent chaos. The storm still raged, a wall of wind and water. A Black Hawk helicopter, painted the flat black of Special Operations, was fighting to stay parked on the heaving helipad. Its landing skids repeatedly touched the steel, then bounced up, the pilots wrestling with the powerful updrafts. The whump-whump of its rotors was a physical concussion, beating against the storm. Reaper and FNG were on one knee, forming a perimeter, their rifles pointed out into the ship's dark superstructure. Sparky was at the chopper's open door, guiding the crew. "Boss, we got him!" Reaper yelled, spotting Cal. "Package is in the engine room, cuffed to the rail," Cal yelled back over the rotors. "Inform the crew. Let's go." He ran to the chopper, ducking under the rotor wash. He looked inside. It wasn't what he expected. It was a MASH unit. Bones Rickon was on the floor, an 4-bag in hand, his movements fast and precise. And kneeling opposite him, her face lit by Bones's headlamp, was Lena. She wasn't a passenger. She was a doctor. "Pressure's dropping, Bones," she called, her voice sharp and clear, her fingers pressed hard on Shadow's dressing. The chopper floor was slick with blood and seawater. "We need another line. He's going into shock." "Working on it," Bones yelled back. Shadow was lying on a thermal blanket, his breathing shallow and pained. But he was alive. Lena had refused to be evacuated first. She had refused to leave the dog. She was, for all intents and purposes, part of the team. Cal climbed in. "Bones, status?" "He's stable." "Mostly," Bones yelled. "She's good, boss. She's a natural." Lena didn't even look up, her focus entirely on Shadow. Reaper and FNG returned, hauling the conscious but defeated form of Silas. They threw him in the back of the chopper and strapped him down. "All aboard!" Reaper roared. The pilot gave a thumbs up. Cal grabbed a strap, his eyes meeting Lena's over their wounded partner. The helicopter's engine screamed in protest as it lifted off, fighting the wind. It tilted dangerously, then gained altitude, pulling them up into the black, rain-filled sky. Cal looked down one last time as the Odyssey, a dying steel beast, was swallowed by the storm. The flight was a blur of noise and vibration. The next clear thought Cal had, the roar of the storm was gone. It was replaced by the deep, steady hum of a carrier's engines. They had landed on the USS Gerald R. Ford. The pre-dawn air was still humid and thick with the smell of sea salt and jet fuel. The storm had passed, leaving behind a bruised purple sky that was beginning to lighten at the horizon. Cal stood on the flight deck hours later. He was clean, showered, but still dressed in a borrowed gray Navy sweatshirt. He felt hollowed out, exhausted to the bone. A young, serious-faced communications officer approached him. "Lieutenant Callahan, we have a secure video call for you. It's General Morgan." Cal nodded, his stomach tightening. He walked into the ship's quiet, dimly lit tactical command center. The general's sharp, stern face filled the screen. "Lieutenant," General Morgan began, his voice raspy. "My daughter, is she?" "She's safe, sir," Cal said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "She's with the medical team. She's unharmed." "Thank you." The general paused, his iron composure cracking for a split second. He cleared his throat. "Thank you, Lieutenant. My daughter. She means. The nation owes you a debt. I owe you a debt." Cal looked at the 4-star general on the screen. He thought of Lena's terrified eyes on the bridge, and then her fierce, commanding gaze on the deck. He thought of her hands, covered in his dog's blood. "Sir," Cal said, his voice quiet but firm. "With all due respect, your daughter saved my K9. She's a fighter." The general stared at him, surprised by the answer. He wasn't seeing a SEAL. He was seeing a man. He nodded slowly. "So I've been told. Bring your team home, son." The screen went dark. Cal walked back out onto the flight deck. The sun was just beginning to crest the horizon, a brilliant, burning orange line that set the clouds on fire. He walked to the leeward side of the carrier, near the infirmary. He just stood there watching the sunrise, his mind, for the first time in 2 years, completely quiet. He heard footsteps. Lena was standing there. She had also cleaned up and was wearing a borrowed Navy sweatsuit that was too big for her. She was holding 2 steaming ceramic mugs. She held one out to him. "Coffee," she said. Her voice was soft. He took it. Their fingers brushed. "Thank you." They stood in silence for a long time, watching the sun come up. "They said," Lena said, looking out at the water, "that Shadow's going to make it. Bones is a miracle worker. They said. The field work, the pressure. We saved his life by a razor's edge. He's going to make a full recovery. Cal looked down at his coffee. He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the mug. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "For staying with him." Lena turned, looking at him. Her eyes were clear, the terror gone, leaving behind a quiet, incredible strength. "I think," she said softly, "we stayed for each other." He looked at her. He saw her. Really saw her. The doctor, the fighter, the woman. The ghost of Emily was still there. A scar on his heart. But the wound wasn't open anymore. It wasn't screaming. Lena had given it peace. Jack Callahan, for the first time in 2 years, smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was small and tired and hesitant, but it was real. He held out his hand. "Jack." She smiled back, a mirror of his own. She shifted her mug and took his hand. Her grip was firm. "Lena." They stood there together, hand in hand, drinking their coffee, and watched the sun rise over the ocean.